Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another Music Moments in the Life of the Old Time Rock and Roller. Today, I have a very special guest, Canadian author, Mr. Rob Bowman. Now, Rob's writing a book on Muscle Shoals and the whole scene, and he contacted me to see if I would do an interview and talk about my time recording old time rock and roll. So, without further ado, Rob Bowman. Hey,
Good
Rob.
morning. Good
How
morning,
are you?
Forrest. How you doing?
I'm good. It's a little early, but we're right with it, like a spring chicken.
Always, always. Now it's interesting. I've known, the Muscle Shoals rhythm section guy since the mid 1980s when I was working on my book on stacks.
Hmm.
And I remember Jimmy Johnson, even when I wasn't writing about Muscle Shoals directly, telling me this great story. He talked about this teenager pulling up in the parking lot of the Muscle Shoals Sound Studio with his parents. And this kid getting out of the car saying to Jimmy, who's hanging on the back porch, I play guitar. Long story short, Jimmy says we ended up bringing him in and he cut the lead guitar solo on old time rock and roll. But I've done a little research on you. I believe you were born in 1950.
Yeah, I was 27,
Yeah,
but
you certainly weren't the teenager. Jimmy told his story till he died. I was with him 2 weeks before he died, and it was always this teenager. So I was shocked when I found that out.
that's
Um,
funny. About 4 years ago, we played at the W.C. Handy Blues Festival in Muscle Shoals at the Shoals Theater. We were the headliner, and it's a 10-day event. It was really great. Jimmy came by after our sound check, and we had a chance to talk and catch up and take pictures and stuff. And he reminisced on the day and so on and so forth. And I don't want to steal your thunder here, so I'll just leave it at that for the
that's
moment.
okay. That's a nice little theater, the Shoals Theater that you played in.
Yeah.
Um, Now, obviously, when you pulled up there, you had actually had a lot of experience. Why don't you quickly capsule how much studio experience you'd had before you came to Muscle Shoals?
I had I think I probably first went in the studio in 1969 with the Boston Rock Symphony. And then when I joined the Wadsworth Mansion, who had a hit single called Sweet Mary, I'm Coming Home.
Right.
We did a 38 state tour opening for Alice Cooper and Edgar Winter. Then we reformed the group in Hollywood and cut our demos, played at the Whiskey, got a record deal. Um, and then I met Roger Dollarhide from Paramount Studios. And Roger had just he was engineering Bobby Womack and Sly Stone and doing his own record at the same time. So Roger was a hoot, and he'd say, "Come on by the studio about I don't know 1 o'clock. I might need you." So I'd show up about one and sit on the beanbag chair, and Roger would be there snorting up lines of coke and going and going. And finally, about 4 in the morning, he'd say, "I don't think I'll need you tonight." I'd say, "Okay, come back tomorrow night." And I'd go through that until finally I got to play on his record. Um, but I joined a band called Silver, Platinum, and Gold that was the leader was Hubie Hurd, and he played with Billy Preston on Will It Go Round in Circles and Space Race and all those hits. There were two former Ikettes, and the drummer, Soko Richardson, was married to one of the singers, Silver, Platinum, and Gold. We had Ronnie Green on the bass. We did 2 albums with them on Far Records, and it was really good rhythm and blues, really good funky stuff. Then I did some recording with Kathy McDonald, and I had recorded with Steve Perry before he joined Journey, and we did 2 songs together. And so I really wasn't a novice in the studio. I had actually um, toured Asia, did a I don't know, 10 countries in Asia in 75. And so I was really fairly experienced when I showed up there. And
Oh,
and Jimmy said to me later, he said, normally I would have told this kid where to go and where the sun don't shine. But there was something about this guy. He had some attitude. He had some moxie. I don't know. I just said, give him a try, give him a try. So he said, "You got your guitar with you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, go get it." And it's funny, I think David Hood said uh, that my parents sat out there in the car with the air conditioner running. My dad was a professor at the University of Alabama and a Texas native, and he never had air conditioning in his car forever. So, uh, so I think initially the story was painted up like, oh, some kid with his parents on vacation, got lost, stumbled in here, and you know,
That's exactly the way it does. I mean, Jimmy had the way you tell the story, you think you were 16 years old, hotshot guitar player, been practicing, maybe had a local band somewhere, but had none of the experience that you had. So when I found the real story, it made a lot more sense to me. But tell me how you end up. You're on the West Coast. You're
right?
doing these sessions out there. How do you end up in that parking lot in Sheffield behind the Muscle Shoals Sound studio? And not only how do you end up there, the story is always your parents. You just deconstructed the air conditioning, but was it really just your dad who you're visiting, or was your
Uh,
mom there too?
oh, it was my stepmom and my dad,
Okay, makes sense. That makes sense.
right? And I think I arrived on Monday from LA. It was the first vacation I had in maybe 5 years. The first time I left LA that wasn't for a tour or something. So it was Thursday, August 7th, 1977.
Good memory.
And I had some help because Elvis had died the week before, and he
Definitely
died on
helps.
a Tuesday.
Right.
And, and I know we did the session on a Thursday, so it wasn't too hard to go back and look up, point of reference. It's 55 years later. So so Thursday came along. Dad said, "What do you want to do today?" And my family members and close people called me Howie. My first name's Forrest, my middle name Howard, and all the friends I had on the East Coast called me Howie. So he said, "Yeah, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, take me up to Muscle Shoals. They've got a great recording scene up there." Because Dwayne Allman had recorded "Hey Jude" with Wilson Pickett back there,
Phenomenal record. Yes.
and I was a huge Dwayne Allman fan and met him in '69. So we got in the car and we drove, and he said, "How are you going to know what to do when we get there?" And I said, "We'll find a music store. We'll ask the guy where the studios are, and we'll go to each one of them." He said, "Okay." So we found the Sheffield Mall, found like a Peaches or some record store. The guy took out a legal pad of paper, and he said, "Okay, you go down Woodward Avenue, and you're going to see Fame Studio on your left, and you're going to go to the end of the block, go up here, and come back this way. And right here is Wishbone Studio with Clayton Ivy. And then
Right.
come on down here, and right here on the corner of Jackson Highway, that's Muscle Shoals Sound." So I went exactly in that order. And probably when I was getting that info from the music store, the Swampers were cutting the track to old time rock and roll. So I went into Fame and met Rick Hall and left them a record or something, and drove up to Wishbone and met Clayton Ivy and left them a record, and went down to Muscle Shoals Sound and went to the back door and knocked, and Jimmy came out. I think Carol Butkus, the studio manager, was there, and she might have got Jimmy. So he said, "Yeah, what can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a studio guitar player from LA. I got a bunch of songs. I got a bunch of records here that I'm on. What's it going to take to play on a record here?" And he said, "Got your guitar with you?" And he just had this feeling. He gave me a chance, probably because I had brass knockers. I don't know. Um, so I walked into the studio room, plugged into the Con strobe tuner, then into a Fender Twin Reverb. And he said, "Now just play along to this, anything you feel like." And so I hear the count off. And I came in and just started filling and riffing and stuff. And at one point, I took a solo. Now, we used to play the Rolling Stones song, "Let It Bleed." We all need someone we can.
Sure.
Well, the way the chords went 1 4 5 was the same way that old time rock and roll went. And most studio players, when they get in a studio situation, they hear the song and they go, "Okay, it reminds me of this. It reminds me of that. Reminds me. I'm going to go with this one," and you give it your best approach. So that's what I did. And then when I was done, Carol said, "Well, give us your union card number." And fortunately, I had joined the union because I needed to be in it to do the USO tour.
Right,
And
right.
so I gave her my union card and said, "Okay, thank you." And it might have been a month later, September, I'm back in my apartment in West Hollywood and the phone rings. "Yeah, this is Carol Butkus. I just wanted to let you know that your track, your solo, is on the next Bob Seger Stranger in Town album, and old time rock and roll will be out there, and Capitol Records will be sending you a check." So I said, "Oh, great." Well, I was so excited. I thought, man, when this record comes out, I'm going to get so much studio work. It's unbelievable. And as guys, rock and roll never forgets. The previous album, I was just such a fan. So the day that Stranger in Town came out, I think the Rolling Stones Sticky Fingers was released at the same time. And I went into the record store and I looked at the back. I'm looking for my name, and it said, "Thanks to the Muscle Shoals Rhythm section."
Right.
I said, "Oh, okay, that's going to help a lot." It, it wasn't until the Greatest Hits album that Jimmy actually had contacted Punch Andrews and said, "Hey, Howie McDonald's the guitar player on this." And so they updated the liner notes for the Greatest Hits, and I got probably a 9 times platinum for that, and 9 times platinum for Stranger in Town, and then another Bob Seger's Greatest Hits behind me. That's platinum. So it turned out pretty darn good.
Pretty darn good indeed. Now, Jimmy also would tell the way he always told the story. He'd go, one day I get a call from Punch Andrews, and he says, he always referred to you as a kid. So that's why I always thought you were younger. But anyway, he goes, Punch says to Jimmy, "This kid's calling me up. Says he played lead guitar in old time rock and roll. He wants a gold record. Is this true?" And Jimmy tells him the whole story, of course. And then, Punch sends you your gold record or platinum record, as the case may be. Is that a little exaggerated? Did you call Punch asking for that gold record or platinum record?
In order to get the record, the artist manager has to approve it.
Sure.
So yeah, I called Punch.
and,
I said, "Hey, I did it. I want it."
I love it.
He said, "Okay, I'll look into it." "Hello, Jimmy. Just got a call from this kid. He couldn't be more than 16 years old."
That's exactly kind of the way it went down. Now, you mentioned David Hood telling the story of, your parents sitting in the parking lot with the air conditioning. Well, we know they didn't have air conditioning. But was David there? Was anybody there besides Jimmy and Carol?
Carol, Jimmy, and David were there.
Oh, David was there then.
He,
So
he was there. And actually, later in life, when I moved back to the Shoals, when I left LA in probably late 88, I moved down there and I recorded an album with Bobby Womack. Now, they had moved from the little Jackson Highway studio to the big former Coast Guard building right on the river. And they each had an office, and they had 2 studios in there. And I used to go by almost every day because that was the nature of things. You hang out at the studio and see what's happening, and see if somebody's coming in and needs a solo.
Catch a session, sure.
That's kind of how it worked with Bobby Womack. Well, David and I got to be pretty good friends. He was a very nice guy, always very open and receptive. And I had asked him what was the most exciting record you ever made, and he said playing bass on Aretha's Respect, and that was pretty heavy. Roger Hawkins, the drummer, to me was one of the greatest rock drummers of all time. because he could hear a song on acoustic guitar and his mind would go, it's this beat, it's rock, and here it is. You know, and once you got the drum beat to the song, you're good. I was in the 7th grade. Roger was maybe 5, 6 years older than me. And I went to the Ben Franklin 5 and Dime and bought Wilson Pickett, Land of a Thousand Dances. I loved that song and the drums and everything. It cost me $1. And little did I know that when Wilson recorded that, at the end, he went over to Roger and he said, "Man, you're a great drummer." And Roger thought about it and he said, "Yeah, I'm a great drummer." And he took that with him going forward. But little did I know, here I was, a little teenager for real, listening to one of the greatest session drummers of all time, and then later being able to work with him. So, you know, that's the kind of stuff that fairy tales are made out of.
Oh, extraordinarily cool. So I want to get this straight. I didn't know that you'd actually come back to the Shoals. When did you move back there? Or when did you move there? Because you weren't from there.
Right. I went there on 3 separate times. The first one in 77. Then I moved there in late 78, did the Bobby Womack album and a demo for Dobie Gray. And then I moved back to New England and joined the #1 money making band up there because I needed some cash. And then I moved out of New England when I left that band back to Muscle Shoals again. So, and then from there I moved to Memphis because it was close and I was leaning heavily into the blues at that time.
Sure, sure. What years were you in Memphis?
Probably 80 to 83.
I only asked because I lived in Memphis too from 83 to 86. So that's good.
Oh man, I saw you on the way out. I knew you looked familiar. I said, Rob.
So when you moved back to the Shoals, and well, when you moved there in 78 after your visit with your stepdad or your dad in 77, were you hoping to get on there as a session player?
Well, I already had been. So
No, I mean regularly, like Pete Carr or somebody.
Right. So the Swampers, Jimmy was the guitar player.
Rhythm, right.
Right. But he was more like of a 2-note player at the right place and the right time, you know. And so what they did is they had kind of a rotating door, if you will, of available good guitar players. Kenny Bell, a friend of mine, he played the rhythm on old time rock and roll. He was a regular in Travis Womack and
Pete Carr had probably left by then.
Carr,
regular for
Pete
years.
Carr was great. So there were a lot of guys that they could choose from. And that's why it was important to get to the studio early before they got up.
Which Womack track did you play on? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm on half the album of The Roads of Life. And
that's great.
You know, just a little aside here. The first song I played on, I heard it and he said, "All right, give me a solo." And it reminded me of Jimi Hendrix's House Burning Down. So I came in with this kind of wicked Hendrix thing. And it finished. I said, "How'd you like that?" He said, "I hated it." I said, "Okay, let's do it again." I turned the little dial. "All right, how'd you like that?" "That's perfect. Give me another one on the next song." So
that's great. I love it.
yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating. I guess there's just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Did you nail that solo on old time rock and roll first time out, or did it take a few?
Oh yeah,
passes?
it was just one time.
Did you know it was a demo? Did you think, okay, whatever?
I think I knew it was a demo, and beyond that, I didn't care.
Because
I was recording in Muscle Shoals, so.
There's several cool aspects to the story, and I'm sure you know this because you knew it was a demo. Seeger liked the song, but he had no intention of using that version, which had your guitar solo on it.
Yeah.
He tried to recut it with the Swampers, and he tried to recut it up in Detroit with the Silver Bullet Band at least 3 times.
Yeah.
Could never get the feel of what had been that demo that you got to play that lead guitar on. So if Seeger had been able to nail it with the Silver Bullet Band or the Swampers, good old Forrest McDonald wouldn't have been on that record. But as it turns out, this kind of funny story, the guy with chutzpah shows up with his guitar and ends up on a demo that ends up becoming a big, big hit. Last question. You went to Fame and Wishbone. That's fascinating to me because I was wondering, why did you pick Muscle Shoals Sound? We did the whole tour. You went those places, you gave him a record. Did you tell him you played and hope you were going to get on a session like you did at Sound?
Oh, sure. And when I had gotten there, the band had just finished and left for the lunch break. So everybody in town pretty much lunch breaked around the same time and would go pretty much to the same place and, just talk, have some iced tea and how's the day going. So, so it was pretty quiet when I showed up at the other places. So,
Got it.
when I did move back there from LA, a buddy of mine, Tony Carey, who played with Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, he's probably the best musician I know overall. We had cut some demos in my apartment in Hollywood, and I took 2 of them to Clayton, and he was this close to recording one on a new album he was doing. But then he said, what I really need is another boogie, oogie, oogie. I said, well, that's not this song. He said,
Right.
He said, well, but thanks for bringing it by and, let me know what else you got.
Did you ever meet Bob Seger?
Bob and I never met.
That's too bad. That would be interesting.
Yeah. There were a couple of real close calls, but it just didn't work out.
Well, Forrest, otherwise known as Howie to your East Coast friends, at least back then, McDonald, thank you so much for taking the time and walking me through this great little magic story of one of the wonderful moments in rock and roll.
Rob, I appreciate you calling me up and getting me on and being a part of musical moments with the old-time rock and roller. And just one thing, I appreciate you, brother. Keep the love in your heart, a song in your head, and I will see you down the musical story highway on the next adventure of the old-time rock and roller. So long, my friends.
Take care.
Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome. That was a lot of fun. And I'm glad we did this because you corrected a whole bunch of things in the story the way Jimmy always loved to tell it. People tell stories and they sort of grow into these picture perfect things and they're not quite always accurate. So I like to get things accurate. This was cool.
It was really great.
All right. So, you take care.
And when do you think that you'll finish the book?
Oh, God, I've already written 120,000 words. It's a long book.
Yeah.
And I'm probably another year and a half. But I don't know if you know, I did a book on Stax, Soulsville USA. It's, it took me years to write, but ended up in the Blues Hall of Fame, won 2 of the 3 American Music Book Awards. We're doing a 6-hour HBO doc now that's coming out next year on Stax. So you do the things right, they can lead to, I won a Grammy for my work on Stax, done 75 CD reissues because of that work. It's, you do a book right, it can go a long way. You'll never make money on the book. Books don't make money, but it can lead to wonderful things. Plus, it tells the history the way it should be told. So, that's my goal.
That's great, man. Last time I saw Jimmy, he expressed on me. He said, "Howie, I made millions on Skinner. I mean, millions."
He did.
Go, Skinner, Jimmy, you go, brother.
He was so proud of that Skinner stuff, and it's funny because they couldn't even get it. They couldn't get a deal at the time.
No, he couldn't.
But
he owned the copyright on the recording, so he got paid in the end.
Smart man.
Yeah, buddy. All right, Rob. Have a great day, my friend.
You too. Bye-bye.
See you later. Thank you.